you're dealing with people's worst day of their lives. So it's not all fluffy, and there is no hair and makeup. I don't know where people get that from.
What? There's no glam squad?
Yeah, there's no glam squad. You
What?
dress yourself. Sometimes you're I'm so good at putting makeup on in a moving car. Not while I'm driving, obviously, but like in the passenger seat. It's hard. It's not what people think it is. It's you're going to a scene, you don't have a bathroom. Sometimes you don't have a lunch. But I wouldn't be doing it for over 10 years if I didn't love it.
Welcome to Be a Baller podcast, where we're building a lifelong legacy for our families, communities, and the world. I'm your host, Coach Tim Brown, and today I'm excited to introduce my guest, Cierra Johnson. Cierra is an anchor and reporter with NBC4 in Columbus, Ohio. Cierra is a proud Central Ohio native, graduate of Hannah Lincoln High School, and one of the great Bobcats at Ohio University, graduate of E.W. Scripps School of Journalism. Today on the show, Cierra will share her journey to building a lifelong legacy. Cierra, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're just so excited to have you in the studio today. Before we get started, I see something very nice on your finger there. It's pretty nice on that finger.
Thank
there.
you.
It looks good on there, we got to first off talk about your husband, Matt, who's also on NBC. The word is he did it big for the proposal. This wasn't no prom proposal.
No.
How was that?
We went to New York.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to go to Europe at the end of the day, like the next day.
Sure.
And we had lunch with my sister, and we walked around Central Park, and we just kind of kept walking, and it started sprinkling, and I was ready to go home. But then he proposed. And then we celebrated in Brussels and Copenhagen and for the Christmas markets. Christmas is my favorite holiday. Wow. So it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
He did it big.
Yes,
now.
He did.
He didn't play around. I know family is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that special relationship that you have with your grandparents?
Yeah, my grandparents, I have one grandmother that's living.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is 100. She will be 101 in December.
Oh.
So we still chat occasionally. We talk on the phone. Memory's not the best, but when she's good, she's good. And she drops knowledge. It kind of repeats some days, maybe 4-minute loop, maybe 5.
Mm-hmm.
But when she speaks, she's encouraging. She will spout out a scripture that applies to the situation you were talking about. She'll say what happened when she was our age. And then it kind of loops. But when she's good, she's good. My dad's parents, my grandma and grandpa, they were awesome, encouraging. If I had an idea, they were like, well, we don't know how that works, but we're here for it. So I had some great grandparents.
What were some of those, like you mentioned some of those things, what were some of those specific life lessons that you learned from your grandparents?
Before I got into news, I was really into science. So probably until about 7th grade, I wanted to be a pediatrician or a neurosurgeon or something science related. We had a program. I went to Monroe Middle School in Columbus for middle school, and they had a partnership with Bell Labs. So every Tuesday we were doing things with scientists, and they were picking me up and after school, and I would tell them what I was doing. And I don't think they understood because I barely understood. Right. But they were just encouraging. They were like, yeah, we could see you being a doctor. We could see you being a surgeon or, whatever it was. It didn't matter what it was. They were encouraging. And they just said, whatever you do, just don't give up. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. So
that's good.
That's
good. You mentioned, I'm sure they were strong women of faith and strong parents. Can you talk about your faith? How important that is to you?
Grew up in the church, grew up at Mount Vernon AME right down the street from Monroe. And then in high school, started going to First Church of God. And then it's kind of in college where I didn't have to go. There was no one telling me to go. So I didn't go. But it was when I started working that I realized, A, I didn't get here by myself. Oh. And B, this is a very stressful job. And you need to have something that grounds you, something to fall back on. So I've lost count of how many times I've moved. I think it was at least 5 this time. But every time I moved, I would try to find a church or a small group. Cincinnati, I had an awesome small group. I went to Crossroads in Cincinnati. Buffalo, I didn't necessarily find a small group, but I was bouncing around to some of the AME churches in Buffalo. Coming back here, I was going back to First Church. And in San Francisco, it was COVID. So a lot of live streaming. So it doesn't really matter where you are as long as you're able to have some type of connection with something or some kind of a group. So
Amen.
It's been great.
Yeah. There's a story about this soapbox
Mhm.
in your first grade classroom.
Uh-huh.
Miss O'Brien, you smiling there.
Yes.
You don't know how to knew Miss O'Brien in the
Yes.
class.
I'm like, wow, he did his research.
Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, so Mrs. O'Brien, she is one of my favorite people. She was actually at my wedding, and
Wow.
it's just awesome, full circle moment. So we had Newsy Tuesday. And so every Tuesday, you would, if you didn't have, if your parents didn't have a subscription, she would, I don't know where, bring out a dozen newspapers, and you would read the article with your parents, and you would cut it out, and then you would explain it to the class. Well, that was my moment to shine. I would dress up on Tuesdays.
Wow.
I would practice in the mirror. I would get on the soapbox.
Wow.
Okay, thank you, Sierra. It's been great. I mean, it was just like the highlight of my week. And I don't know why. I think it was just so kids could get over their fear of, public speak. I never had one. But it was just awesome. I loved the newspaper. I loved talking. I loved just being up there and having people, being forced to listen to me. And me and Mrs. O, we get lunch and we text all the time. And I'm just so grateful that she even thought to do that with a first grade class. I mean, really, really cool. And I think it kind of like just started all of it.
You talked about how you was into science, pediatrician or whatnot. What was that moment you decided you want to be a journalist?
There were a couple. It was algebra. That was not my jam.
Okay.
Math just did not make sense to me, but I think it was September 11th. I remember being in 8th grade and everyone getting picked up. And for some reason, we never watched anything on TV. I don't know why the teachers made that decision. I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point, but I just remember something was going on and I had no idea what and why it was such a big deal. Like I remember seeing parents crying and like you knew as a kid it was a big deal, but I didn't know why. So when I got home, all I did was watch just the news. I just sat there and watched. And then I would go to school and then come back and watch the news. I mean, my parents watched anyways. But from then on, I just knew like these people have like all of the answers. And it's just kind of a concept of like, a little bit about everything. They knew what was happening at the zoo. They knew what was happening with September 11th. How do they know everything? And like people come to them for answers. And it was at that point, I'm like, well, it doesn't seem to require algebra. You get to talk. It kind of felt like the soapbox. I mean, and then from there, I'm like, I don't really know how I get to that point, but I want it to happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story. That's a great memory. That's a great memory. You went to high school and you're part of the Gahanna Lincoln High School award-winning news team.
Yeah.
How did that experience help you prepare for college?
The experience, I can't even put into words how much it prepared me. So the September 11th happened. I was in 8th grade and I was in Columbus. So we moved after winter break from my 8th grade year. So I started Gahanna middle of 8th grade and then went to Gahanna for all of high school. So Gahanna, you have to have a speech class, which that was no problem for me. And then you apply to be in the intro to TV program. So I applied and I got it. And then I did the full TV course, but it was a class. It was a whole class period. You go and you rotate between doing morning announcements. So every beginning of third period, right before Channel 1 came on, you were doing morning announcements. But then you had a half-hour show every week on the public access channel. We had a show.
Wow.
We had a show.
Wow.
So we were going around the school with our big cameras and the VHS tapes and interviewing. We had student of the week. If the robotics team was doing something, we didn't get too controversial. I mean, it had to be done within the third period. But we were editing. I could edit a news story before I could drive. We used tape to tape, which was, no one uses that anymore, but it's what the photographers now used back in the 80s. So if I was in a pinch, I could do that. We used Avid, which was computer based. I knew what a VOSOT was. I knew what a package. I knew I knew what all of the terms were before I even got to college. So I made a reel like you do when you're interviewing for a news job, and I sent it to OU.
Wow.
I don't know if that was a requirement. I just felt like it was something I needed to do. And it prepared me. I mean, it taught me how to write. It taught me what like nap pops were. Like if you're, doing a story on basketball, why not have the sound of the basketball dribbling? I mean, I was 16 kind of putting that together. So it just taught me that this is something that's really cool, and sometimes it gets you out of class. And B, it also it's really fun. You get to talk to people. You get to talk to people you probably would never talk to. So
it sounds like you had a good time.
a great time. WGLH was my first station, is what I say.
You talk about, back in the day, the word is you have a photographic memory.
I where are you getting this
I
from?
can't tell you my sources, but
It sounds like my dad. I don't think it's technically photographic, but it's really good when there's like a disagreement. I can recall exactly where we were when something was said, and it also helps kind of connect the pieces. So, say there was, a homicide in one part of town, and there's like a name of like maybe a suspect.
Mm,
For me, I'm like that name sounds really familiar. I think it's connected to something.
mm.
So it's not technically photographic, but I have a really good memory.
Right,
And in news, it kinda helps.
right, definitely, definitely. The word is you wanted to attend Ohio University School of Journalism,
Mhm.
and you jumped right on that your freshman year in high school.
Yeah.
'Cause, it's hard to get in that school.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying I didn't wanna go too far.
Mhm,
I didn't want it to be out of state because that sounds expensive.
mm,
And I just wanted it to be a really great program. So my junior year, they have a high school summer workshop, and I think it's like maybe it's 4 days, I don't know, but my parents dropped me off, and you essentially kind of do what the students here are doing, and
okay.
you kind of observe, and you put on, like, a newscast, or if you're print, you put on a newspaper. And it was at that moment, it was like the perfect summer day,
Right,
everyone
right.
was out
Oh, yeah,
walking,
that's
and I'm
Athens.
like, "Yeah, this is it."
Yeah, that's Athens. Speaking about Ohio University, can you talk about that experience in the school and
Mhm.
how that, propelled you to the next level?
I know things are different now, but when I was there, we were on the quarter system, so you
Yeah.
had a chance to kind of move a lot more and do what you wanna do. So, I was in the School of Journalism, and I know my first J101, it was, like, the hardest
Mm,
class. It was just hard. And then we had, like, a copy editing class that was also hard. So, there was a moment when I contemplated changing to retail.
mm,
And I took a retail class and I kind of was just bored. I'm like, well, retail isn't just shopping. There's like a lot of like data entry
yeah,
and buying, and it's not what I thought it
right.
was. So then at that point, I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to really get serious. So I didn't go like the gridiron route, which is super sports heavy, and you have to actually really love sports. And I don't. I went the Sayudi route. So Sayudi means voice. I think it means voice in Swahili, and it was a lot of the Black kids in the broadcast program.
Mm,
And so we had like a talk show.
okay.
So we would talk about some of the Black professors and what Black Student Communication Caucus was doing, and
Yeah,
if Greek life had anything going
okay.
on. So that was my way of kind of getting in. And then I realized, well, there's other people in the world other than us. So
Mhm,
then I kind of dabbled in another sports esque show, just so I can say I've done something other than just a talk show format. And that was great. But then for my junior and senior year, you actually had to put on a newscast. So we put on Midday, which was the PBS affiliate for Southeast Ohio.
okay.
So I had no choice but to talk about sports.
Right,
And if there was like an incident on campus or Halloween or whatever it
right.
was, but you rotated between producer, and then you were anchoring, and then you were reporter one day, and you had, deadlines,
Mhm,
and it was real life. I mean, the
right.
deadline obviously was like 24 hours. You had a whole day to work on it,
Mhm.
but it taught me that you have to really get it done.
Wow. So you got a myriad of experiences
Yeah.
there that you got a
Yeah.
chance to experience some of. Which part did you really enjoy?
Um, I liked a lot of it. I liked the reporting, but the cameras were so big.
Right,
They're
right.
not like the little, I mean, I liked that part, but I'm dragging it up and
Right.
down hills, and it
And
was
Athens,
like
yes,
it
that's
was
clear.
it was it was literally exhausting, but it set me up for my job in Buffalo because
Okay.
I was doing that by myself, and the
Wow.
cameras were heavy, and you were
Right.
dragging it in 20-degree weather. So I mean,
Right.
everything happens for a reason, but at the time, I'm like, this is not it.
Right. 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 We had the legendary Jerry Revis on the show.
Mhm.
Uh, can you talk about his impact on your career? I understand you did a summer program or a
Yeah.
program with him.
Oh gosh, I forgot about that. So I met Mr. Revish initially. He says, "Call me Jerry." I'm not doing that. That's
And,
weird. But I met him, I wanna say it was my sophomore year of high school. So at the time, there's the National Association of Black Journalists,
Mhm.
and then they have city chapters. Ours is the Columbus Association of Black Journalists. It is now just coming back. My coworker Carrie and
Nice.
I and some other folks are bringing it
Oh,
back, but
nice. Nice.
backtrack to high school, it was really up and moving at the time,
Nice.
and they had a high school journalism workshop. I think it was maybe 4 weekends in the spring, and we met at Ohio State, and they taught us like what the style book was, like the Associated Press style book. We wrote articles, we did mock newscasts. And as the weeks went on, some of the kids kind of stopped coming. And I look around, I'm like, well, there's not many of us, but
Right.
this is fun. I'm going to keep coming. And he was so encouraging. It was him and Mike Jackson, and they were so encouraging. And sometimes when I get excited, I still talk a little quickly. But in high school, it was like out of control. It was auctioneer speed. And they both would just say, you have something great to say. Just shut down a little. So that was when I first met him. And then fast forward, I would email him occasionally in college and say, hey, I'm still really into this thing. Any advice? And he'd give some advice. And then fast forward to my first time at NABJ, the national convention. I want to say it was in San Diego. Channel 10 had a career fair booth.
Nice.
And I walked up with my resume. I was not obviously prepared to have my first job be on air there. Right. But he was like, let's save this and let's stay in touch. Right. And then fast forward, I think I moved back home the first time in 2016, 17. And we were coworkers. And he was so encouraging. I remember my first live shot, and he said, you did a good job. And I almost just wanted to just start crying. You grew up watching, telling you you did a good job. He was always just so encouraging. And then he was also really good with critiques. They were helpful. They were helpful critiques. So he's just awesome.
Wow. You worked at KNN TV in San Francisco, stations of Buffalo, Cincinnati. What brought you back to Central Ohio?
The first time or the second time?
Second time.
The second time. I think at some point you just move around and you realize there's going to be no perfect city, no perfect situation. So Cincinnati, my job, I wasn't on air, but I had a good time. Socially, I had church friends. I had friends in other organizations. Buffalo, the city was a little hard. It was a little segregated. The winters obviously just went on forever. But professionally, best time of my life. And then I came here. I grew at Channel 10, but I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, but I was home. So this final time, after coming from San Francisco during COVID, I just wanted to be around family. I don't move for relationships. I think that's kind of like a crazy idea, but I'm like, well, if this doesn't work, my family's here.
Right.
So, I mean, but it did work, and, the end it actually did. But I want to feel at home. And Columbus is home. I know the people. I was explaining to someone what City Center was the other day, or like the context of like the continent, or like just certain. There's things you get if you're from here, and someone will ask like, "Hey, is this part of like Linden or East?" Just being able to have perspective and know people, and it hits a little different than being in a city where you really have no tie to.
Right.
So between that professionally and my family being here, and Matt being here and his family being here, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I think the blessing is the Bible says this: all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. But the key for you is called according to His purpose.
Yes.
And truly, you've been called to a purpose.
Yeah.
To His purpose.
And it all works out.
Together. It all works
out. It always works out.
Take a little bit here, a little bit there. When you put all that together, you're like, oh yeah, that's why I was in Buffalo.
Yeah. In
spite of all them long winters, all that snow.
Yes.
That's why I was in San Francisco seeing those experiences.
Yeah.
And they all kind of work together. Off air, we talked a little bit about, I want you to expound on this women in journalism, the impact and just the opportunities or lack of opportunities.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
We were saying for women, sometimes it's just tough. This is such a visual medium, and then combine that with Instagram and social media, and everyone has something to say. Sometimes it's really encouraging, like, oh, you did a great story about getting heat for that older family who's, but then sometimes it's you're fat. Or it's like, I don't like what you had on. I don't think men get those messages. Sometimes they're just downright creepy. Some of the things my coworkers and friends at other stations have gotten, I've known people that have had restraining orders. It's just a really weird space. You're simply doing a job. The things people say to us, they wouldn't say to the teller at Chase. And then it's also the pressure of, do I feel like I look good enough for this? Or, if you have something going on, well, then everyone is going to see it. And it's a weird, there's not a lot of careers like this where everyone feels so entitled to having an opinion about what you're doing. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's really different.
Well, the young people in the audience, how would you encourage them?
In this field?
Yes.
Just stick with it. It's hard. It is a hard job. It's mentally hard. I've seen countless dead bodies. I've seen limbs. I've seen people lose people minutes before I walk up. That is terrible, and it kind of weighs on you. It's physical. This is the second job where I'm not doing the camera myself. So in Buffalo, I shot the story, I wrote it, I edited. I didn't ever do my own live shots, but I'm traipsing around doing things myself. That's exhausting. I would come home some days and just fall right asleep. It literally is physical. Between that and the hours, Matt is mornings. I was mornings in San Francisco. So there were some days I was waking up at 1:30 in the morning to drive to a wildfire an hour and a half away for a 4:00 live shot. I mean, it's a lot. But if you really want to do it, then it's possible.
Yes.
And it's great. I mean, there's not many jobs where you could do a job and then at the end of the day, see what you spent your shift doing, which is awesome. But it's not fluffy. You're not an Instagrammer. You're not an influencer. I mean, you're dealing with, legalese. You're dealing with people's worst day of their lives. So it's not all fluffy, and there is no hair and makeup. I don't know where people get that from.
What? There's no glam squad?
Yeah, there's no glam squad. You dress yourself. Sometimes I'm so good at putting makeup on in a moving car. Not while I'm driving, obviously, but like in the passenger seat. I mean, it's hard. It's not what people think it is. You're going to a scene, you don't have a bathroom. Sometimes you don't have a lunch. I mean, but I wouldn't be doing it for over 10 years if I didn't love it. I mean, I weirdly like it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the good side of that is, the word is you are a fashionista. You love to travel.
Oh, I love clothes and fashion. You have to have a hobby. I worked retail since high school. I mean, it started, I've worked at a good number of stores at Easton. If they're around in 2007, I probably worked there. And I just love traveling. The thing about news is you don't get a lot of time to do international. You have to kind of finagle your days. But when I get a chance to go, we did Copenhagen, Brussels. Me and my sister love. She works at Google, so she has a lot of ties to the Bay Area. Yeah. Nice. So we'll do like a Tahoe or a Napa or like a long weekend in Puerto Rico. That's my jam. Just anything just to kind of see how other people are doing things, just something a little different. Buffalo, spent a lot of time in Toronto. I think that's where kind of I have my passport. Well, I mean, I'm literally 6 minutes from the border. So, but it's just fun to get out of your bubble.
You mentioned your sister.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that relationship?
Yes.
That you and her had?
That is my best friend. We talk a lot. We talk multiple times a day. We're 3.5 years apart. So I think when I was like high school, college, it was close, but like far enough to like, we were never in school together, which was probably the best idea ever. But I think once she left, she went to University of Kentucky. And then where did she? Western Kentucky for grad school. Post grad school, we got super close. I bounce ideas off of her. Sometimes I'm the more logical one. Sometimes she's more logical. But we both we're really good for planning a trip over text. Like, you want to go to Keeneland and, bet on ponies? Sure, let's go. And then, she flies in. She lives in New York, so I go to visit her all the time. She literally is my best friend. She is she's just the coolest person. Yeah.
You are very involved in the community, a lot of different organizations.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for you to use your platform to help others?
I think, first of all, this sounds kind of weird, but selfishly, it helps me for a number of reasons. When you move around a lot, it's hard making friends. You don't want all of your friends to be your colleagues. I mean, it's great, but you need to have friends outside of that. But then it gives you a purpose and it helps someone else. I'm on the Wonderball committee. So even when I was in San Francisco, I was hopping on Zooms, kind of like helping to plan that. And they raise money to do outreach programs for other groups. For a long time, I was in junior league, which is a women's group.
Yes.
So every time I moved a city, I would join
Oh,
that.
nice.
And every city's mission is kind of different.
Mhm.
So Cincinnati, they were real big on raising money to build a dental clinic in one of the schools in
Oh,
Cincinnati.
nice.
But then you go to a city like Buffalo, and they're really big on like homeless outreach.
Mhm.
So it's kind of cool seeing how every city, how their mission and their needs are different. It's just nice just to help people too. I mean, you see every day at work the need, and
Mhm.
it's like, well, you can't help everyone on every story.
Right.
So kind of find a couple of organizations that you're passionate about. I'm passionate about women, kids, and Black journalists.
Mhm.
So if there's something that involves that, then I just kind of jump in.
Wow. That's great. You know, this is a legacy podcast.
Mhm.
You know, when you think about that word, what does the word legacy mean to you?
This also may sound weird, but I didn't think about it for the longest
Mhm.
time. I think you're just so worried about getting to the next step
Right.
and doing a good job in the moment.
Mhm.
I think it really took COVID to be like,
Mhm.
wow, like kind of look back and just think I've come a long way. But then it also was like kind of looking at a Jerry or
Mhm.
looking at a Yolanda or
Right.
looking at an Angela or looking at a Khalid
Yes.
and saying, if they had that type of an impact on
Come
me
on.
indirectly, what am
Mhm.
I doing for others? So it's about being in the community. You get asked to MC a lot of stuff, and sometimes you just want to say no. But if it involves speaking at a school, if
Mhm.
it involves raising money for a cause, then I will not say no.
Mhm.
Maybe I shouldn't say that now, but I mean, you like I was saying before we started, you can't be what you don't see.
Mhm.
So if that means me emceeing something even after a long day of work, if it encourages somebody, maybe I should look at the news more. Maybe I should consider this as a career, or maybe I should reach out and email her just for a little bit of advice.
Mhm.
Then, I mean, any little bit I can do to help.
Oh, amen, amen. Well, you know, this has been fun.
Yeah.
This has been really fun.
I
I've
like to
learned.
chat.
So and I think your chatting is a blessing to others. You know, just hearing your story of encouragement to others that are thinking about the field, or just your enthusiasm for your job. You
Yeah.
know, once persons figure out what they want to be, you know, how exciting it is.
Yeah.
You know, when you find that thing, it does become work. You know, and then also appreciate the impact that you're having. You know, using your impact to bless. That's what legacy is all about.
Yeah.
Using our impact to bless others that we don't even know. We
Yeah.
have no idea who's going to be encouraged by this, but God knows.
Yes.
That's why here. So
That's
I want to
part.
thank you for bringing joy to our studio today.
Thank
This
you
has
so
been
much.
fun.
Thank you for having
Yeah.
me.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's podcast of Be a Baller. I want to thank our special guest, OU Bobcat. I always got to get that in. Cierra Johnson, for sharing her wisdom and experience with others. Thank you, Cierra, for your motto of excellence for young ladies to inspire and chase their dreams. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Remember, building a lifelong legacy is not just what we achieve in life, but also how we can use our gifts and talents to make a positive impact on the world around us. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date on all the latest episodes. Our podcast guests are always willing to share wisdom and inspire others to build a legacy that lasts. Thanks, Cierra.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and family. The Be a Baller podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. This podcast was created by Coach Tim Brown and recorded and edited by the video production class of Worthington Christian High School. Be sure to come back next week as we continue to discuss on how to build a lifelong legacy. Until then, don't forget to be a baller.